Hello, I'm Martyn Warwick of TelecomTV. We're here in trendy Chelsea in London with some trendy Chelsea traffic going past. It's quite noisy. Anyway, I'm talking with Dean Bubley, who is the founder of Disruptive Analysis. Dean, welcome. Do you expect WebRTC to be disruptive to telcos, or do you think it could potentially help them to get into OTT services and run them with their existing switched telco services?
I think that WebRTC really takes us from where we are today, which is service providers have both challenges and opportunities, and magnifies everything. It makes the opportunities larger, but it also makes the threats worse. So for those service providers that are already innovating around sort of voice messaging, video, it should make things easier in terms of bringing new services to market. But for those which are, for want of a better term, sort of running scared, I think that it's just going to exacerbate the situation.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, you know, one of the common cliches, if you like, about WebRTC is that it potentially kills Skype. Is something which gets bandied around. I'm not sure I agree with that, but frankly, even if it did, anything which can kill Skype is not going to be a friend of the telecom operators either, and is probably going to be either bigger, scarier, or more numerous. And so I think that in this case, my enemy's enemy is my friend does not apply.
Changing tack slightly now, Dean, there's been a lot of talk, speculation in the industry and outside it about the amount of telco organisational change to the culture that exists in the old-fashioned incumbent telcos. Do you think that's necessary? Is it happening? Is there a lot of resistance? And can you give us some examples of where you've seen changes being made?
Right, there's certainly a wide variety of strategies that service providers are following, depending on their internal resources, the competitive dynamics of their given markets, the risk appetites of their management and their investors. And certainly a number of them are going down the route towards digital services, is a convenient term. I mean, that's a fairly large banner term, and it can be consumer entertainment services. So you have some that are providing music services or equivalents to maybe to YouTube for online video. You have ones which are doing vertical industry services in healthcare or in finance or government. And then you have others which are doing communications and maybe social network type propositions, either tied to their existing infrastructure or some cases completely decoupled. And almost looking like an internet or OTT play in itself. And certainly two that I would put in that latter category are Telefonica and Telenor. Telefonica has got a couple of different things going on. Firstly, it acquired a company called Topbox about a year and a half, 2 years ago, and that is a cloud platform provider for WebRTC to allow companies to embed video into contact centres and websites and things. And that is, at the moment, not really linked into the Telefonica sort of like main network services strategy. In fact, it's based in San Francisco. The other thing that Telefonica has is a sort of hybrid social network almost like internal MVNO in Spain called Tuenti. And they've recently announced an application which runs on both mobile devices and on the browser, which is a WebRTC voice over IP messaging client, which again is separate from the main sort of Telefonica voice and messaging infrastructure. But in that case, they've actually done something even more interesting, where they've gone down the route on mobile broadband of zero rating the data traffic used in it. So that brings together a whole host of sort of separate buzzwords, the sort of zero rating, OTT, WebRTC, mobile broadband, MVNO, and they've rolled it all into one. I thought that's a really interesting hybrid option that they've assembled there. Telenor is interesting. Telenor has a group called Telenor Digital, which acts as a sort of internal product factory for sort of cool new services, which they hope to integrate into their main line of business, as well as having as independent services. You can almost think, I see one of the trends I'm seeing with service providers is moving towards a sort of almost like a car industry approach, where the 2015 version of your plan, it's like the 2014 one, but it's got some extra features in it. So in a car, maybe you have a more powerful engine or more airbags, or slightly different design. With telecoms, you might find that next year's version of the plan is the same price, but has some free content or a new communications mode, or it comes with a digital locker or something else. And the key for the product managers there is to come up with cool new features to put into the plan, which are differentiating against competition and relatively cheap to develop as well. And so, that's certainly the sort of thing that I'm expecting companies like Telenor to do. Specifically, one of the things they developed last year was called Appear.in, which is a WebRTC video chat service. At the moment, it's completely free. It's browser-based, and there's also a mobile app that goes with it. And recently, I interviewed the lead developer on that, and the story of how that came to pass is very, very un-telco-like. Essentially, they had spotted WebRTC a while back and thought that sounds interesting, and they'd given a project to 3 interns over last summer to try and build something with it. And some number of weeks or a couple of months later, they came out of the prototype of Appear.in. The rest of them looked at it, said that's quite good, and essentially that was how the product came to fruition. And then even more remarkable was how they launched it. And I'm not going to try a Norwegian accent, but the long and short of it was saying, well, in the summer, lots of people in Norway go on holiday for the whole month of August. And I'm quoting here, and so because there were no grown-ups around, we just launched it. And this is what a conference in the US in front of a room full of telco executives from sort of AT&T and Verizon, and the sort of looks around the room of, you can't do that. You can't. By contrast, there's another operator I'm not going to name that looked at WebRTC recently, and I talked to the product manager there, and he said, well, it's going to be a while because before we started doing anything, we asked the regulator, and the regulator sent us 12 pages of questions. So there is, if you like, the old world and the new. There's the web world, which is build it, chuck it over the wall, see what happens, and if we get a call from the regulator afterwards, then we'll deal with it as it comes, which is pretty much the way that Skype and Viber and everyone else have grown up. And then there's a traditional telco approach of we need to be methodical, we need to send it through the 73 process steps we have defined for service creation, it goes into the machine and maybe comes out the other end in 2 years' time. And I think there's going to be quite a few political discussions inside service providers about how you set yourself up to do one or the other, how, if there's hybrids, what the risks are, what the opportunities are. But ultimately, the world, if you look at the web and why Facebook spent $19 billion on WhatsApp, that's 35 people who just went away and did something, rather than 35 lawyers going through the fine print.
And what about these telcos becoming more software-centric? How difficult is it for them to achieve that?
So for those operators that want to become more software-enabled and more agile, but equally still want to keep at least one foot in the traditional telco camp of whether it's using IMS cores, whether it's connecting to existing legacy infrastructure, working with traditional numbering, and also their sort of back office BSS, OSS on provisioning and billing and so forth. There are some challenges to how far they can experiment simply, quickly, cheaply, while still maintaining sort of some of the telco DNA at the same time. And there's sort of multiple parts to that problem. Firstly, there needs to be a recognition that it is a problem, and there needs to be executive level sponsorship to sort of do something about it. And assuming that they're not going to go completely down the path of a pure web company, then they have some interesting challenges around their organisational capabilities, whether they're doing stuff in-house, whether they're working with partners, how they prototype stuff. I think one of the big issues for service providers is coming up with a good idea, the length of time between that and actually getting it out the door as a mainstream service. One of the institutionalised obstacles is the difficulty of trialling things, of trying stuff. What often in the web world gets called failing fast. Iterate. Can you do an A/B test of something where you say, you know what, we'll come up with 2 versions of this service and we'll give them to 2,000 people each simultaneously, and we'll test the uptake and the satisfaction levels, and being able to do that on not just have the software on the devices, but have software in the network which allows rapid change and update. That's in my view, one of the early use cases for things like NFV, where if there's a way of virtualizing, it could be an IMS core, or it could be other components of the infrastructure, where there is little or no upfront capex, where limited scale trials can be deployed and in fact productionized, so that it might be possible to launch a limited production run either in a particular geographic area or a particular opco for a large group or a particular demographic without rebuilding the whole network across the whole country or across the whole system. And there's certainly various approaches here. One that I've certainly been exposed to recently is Metaswitch's Project Clearwater, which is an open source IMS platform, which is in that model of allowing rapid innovation. And certainly there's a number of companies that have API platforms. There's a bunch of collaborative approaches that allow service providers to sort of just do it rather than spend endless cycles of spinning their wheels.
Dean Bubley, great depth of knowledge. Thank you very much indeed.